After the defeat of Aizen at the end of the Fate Karakura Town arc, we had a 17-month time skip which leads into the beginning of the Fullbring arc. As far as I know, the Fullbring arc is one of the most misunderstood story arcs within all of Bleach. While I have made several videos on my channel praising the Fullbring arc, one notable area that I think Kubo could have improved upon was giving characters like Chad a bit more agency within a story arc that is centered around their powers. While Chad is initially hyped as being a member of this mysterious group called Execution, once we start to learn about the members of the organization, Chad more or less fades into the background. And this is even more apparent when the Gote 13 captains return to the world of the living to help Ichigo. I've always believed that a story arc like the Fullbring arc was supposed to be Chad's moment to shine, but unfortunately we didn't get to see him showcase any of his powers, and its character experienced minimal to no growth during the course of the story arc. In this video, I'm going to be examining how the story of Bleach would have been impacted if Chad had more of a major role within the Fullbring arc. I'm going to be delving deep into the growth and changes that his character may have experienced, as well as speculate about the iconic battles that Chad may have taken part in. Make sure that you stick around until the very end of this video, as I'll be theorizing about how Chad's character development would have substantiated Ichigo's newfound knowledge about his own Fullbring abilities. So without further delay, here is my video exploring how Chad's full potential could have been realized during the Fullbring arc. Discover the Undead Collection and be amongst the very first to join us on our journey over at getsuga.com. The Fullbring arc begins with Ichigo coming to terms with having lost his Shinigami powers. After struggling to get used to this new normal, he ends up meeting Ginjo Kugo, who we later learn was a former substitute Shinigami. In the present day, Ginjo is a Fullbringer and he is the leader of an organization known as Execution. The Fullbring arc focuses on Ichigo awakening his own Fullbring abilities. We learn that the powers that Chad and Orihime had awakened way back during the substitute Shinigami arc are in fact Fullbring abilities. Understandably, Chad and Orihime should have had more of a role within this story arc, but in the end, Chad's main purpose was reduced to alerting Ichigo to the existence of the Fullbringers, as well as providing exposition and increasing Ichigo's awareness about his own latent abilities. Now, the narrative structure of the Fullbring arc leaves little room for us to explore how Chad's own powers could have been developed. This story arc really could have been an incredible way for Ichigo and Chad's relationship to have really been explored further, but in my opinion, there was just so much left on the table and a lot of wasted potential, especially when it comes to Chad's character. So let's look at how Kubo could have expanded upon the role of Chad within the Fullbring arc. In chapter 436, we see Ichigo undergoing training in order to bring out his own Fullbring. A Fullbringer is a human with the ability to freely draw on and manipulate the soul of physical objects. They also have the ability to share powers with or steal powers from a human Shinigami hybrid. Before a Fullbringer is born, they inherit trace amounts of hollow power due to their mother being attacked by a hollow during pregnancy. They also randomly inherit a fragment of the Soul King's body, possibly during the cycle of reincarnation. Once a Fullbringer is able to draw out and manipulate the soul of a physical object, the physical object ends up changing form and it develops a unique ability. Typically, when Fullbring powers are utilized, a bright green light is produced which emanates from the physical object. Chad reminds Ichigo that in order to draw out the soul of his Shinigami badge, he needs to lean on his pride. Now, this is exactly what Chad had felt the very first time that he was able to use his Fullbring, known as the right arm of the giant. In chapter 44, Urahara explains to Chad and Orihime that the source of their powers comes from Ichigo. Ichigo, in the beginning as a Shinigami, had an extraordinary amount of spiritual pressure. However, his ability to control this energy was limited, and as a result of that, the people around him were affected by all of the energy that was flowing out of him. The souls of Orihime and Chad were affected, and so their dormant spiritual abilities were awakened after coming into contact with Ichigo. In chapter 433, it's revealed that Chad's powers are actually a product of his Fullbring. The source of Chad's Fullbring powers in actuality is the skin on his arms. When he was younger, Chad had faced discrimination for the color of his skin, but after his grandfather had taught him to be proud of his own heritage, his skin on his right arm had become the physical object which he had transformed into his Fullbring power. Despite this incredible setup and explanation, we don't really see Chad utilize much of his powers during the Fullbring arc. During the Soul Society arc, Kubo does a fantastic job of illustrating how the friendship between Ichigo and Chad had developed. In chapter 102, we see that Chad had met Ichigo after Ichigo had beaten up a group of thugs. When Ganju expresses his concern over Chad's well-being, Ichigo demonstrates how much faith he has in his friend by stating that he cannot imagine Chad losing. Between chapters 105 to 106, we see Chad taking part in battle when he fights against the captain of the 8th Division, Shunsui Kyoraku. More of Chad's backstory is later revealed here when Ichigo asks Chad why he won't defend himself. Chad explains that he had promised to his grandfather that he would never use his fists for his own sake. He explains that he used to live in Mexico before moving to Japan because his parents had passed away when he was very young and he didn't have any other relatives. When Chad is captured by a group of thugs, their leader attempts to steal his necklace. This is when Ichigo arrives just in time to help and rescue Chad. In return, Ichigo makes Chad promise that he won't hit people on his own account, but rather he will only fight and hit people for the sake of helping Ichigo. They both had made a pact that they would fight for each other. Kubo effectively characterizes Chad as a loyal and caring friend here who will stop at nothing in order to help his friend Ichigo. During the Arrancar arc, Chad feels like he's being left behind. This is after he is defeated by Yami and he ends up being saved by Ichigo from the Arrancar Deroy Rinka. In chapter 214, Chad had asked Urahara to train him. During this time, Chad trains with Renji from chapters 223 to 224. We see the fruits of Chad's training when he travels to Hueco Mundo and he battles against the Privaron Espada Gatenbine. In chapter 259, Chad reveals the true form of his right arm of the giant, as Chad notes that his powers appear to have gotten stronger ever since he had arrived within Hueco Mundo. This is because his Fullbring abilities have originated from the influence of a hollow. After Gatenbine reveals his true form to Chad, Chad reveals that his grandfather's soul dwells in his right arm, thus his power is a defensive power. Via his training, Chad was able to unlock his offensive power known as Left Arm of the Devil. I really do feel like Kubo was setting up Chad to have a really strong character arc throughout the entire series. During the Fake Karakura Town arc, the most that we do see out of Chad is him fighting against hollows with Renji, and then he more or less disappears for about 200 chapters since Kubo needed to explore Aizen's battle against Ichigo and the Gote 13. This now brings us to the events of the Fullbring arc. The early portions of the Fullbring arc center around Ichigo's first meeting with Ginjo and his introduction to execution and the mystery of the villainous Tsukishima. In chapter 433, Ginjo explains that Chad is one of them, but I think that Kubo should have explained how Chad had discovered execution, as this would have had more of an impact when he eventually sees Ichigo with Ginjo. We know that Fullbringers have the ability to share powers with or to steal powers from a human Shinigami hybrid. Chad in fact had volunteered to relinquish his own powers so that Ichigo could regain his. At the start of chapter 424, we get a glimpse of Ichigo's waning spiritual pressure and we see the effect that this has on Chad. Kubo does a great job of showcasing how Chad, Uryu and Orihime are concerned about Ichigo and the fake smile that he has on his face. It would have been great if Kubo included some scenes where Chad interacts with Ichigo and how he is impacted with Ichigo struggling to come to terms with no longer having Shinigami powers. This would have been great setup for where Ichigo finds out that Chad is a member of Execution. In chapter 429, Orihime pays a visit to Ichigo. During her visit, she reveals that she is worried about him because she thought that he was being followed by some stranger or that Ichigo was probably in some trouble. Uryu wants to pay a visit to Ichigo also, but stops outside as soon as he senses Orihime's spiritual pressure. Just before he is about to leave, Tsukishima appears behind him, and Uryu ends up being swiftly cut down as we see him lying in a hospital bed in chapter 430. When Ichigo arrives to see him, Uryu does not want to share any information about the attack, but Ryuken does share some exposition with us when he reveals that Uryu was not attacked by a hollow or a Shinigami. Ryuken hypothesizes that the enemy might have come into a power that they know nothing about, as he states that these spiritual pressure remnants are more similar to what Orihime and Chad are. In chapter 431, Orihime asks Ichigo if he has heard about Chad. It appears as though nobody knows where he is. This was definitely a lost opportunity here because Kubo could have focused more on what Chad's activities were during this period of time when he was absent from the story. It would have been an excellent opportunity to see how Chad had become a member of Execution here. Chapters 438 to 451 of the Fullbring arc focus mainly on Ichigo's training and Orihime and Chad being followed by Tsukishima. In chapter 444, Chad speaks to Ginjo about Tsukishima's ability. Chad was able to correctly assume that Tsukishima could plant a thought or a memory into his victims. Ginjo doesn't really pay much attention to this, and meanwhile, Ichigo's powers continue spiraling out of control. Ginjo states that Tsukishima's ability is called Book of the End, and it is a sword with extremely high offensive capabilities that is able to cut anything. Despite Ginjo's explanation, Chad appears not to be convinced, and he continues to prod Ginjo, stating that Tsukishima must have some sort of a special ability that extends beyond just offensive power. Ginjo insists that Fullbring powers do not change with growth, while Chad reiterates that his Fullbring powers have undergone plenty of changes over time. I believe that Kubo should have used these chapters to really expand upon Chad's role within the story and to explain more details about his powers. Instead of Chad going to train by himself in chapter 449, we should have been shown how he fares in a fight against another Fullbringer. It would have been great to actually see him go one-on-one against Tsukishima protecting Ichigo. When Chad has a flashback in chapter 449, he seems to have no idea about what happened afterwards. While Ichigo was training to activate his own Fullbring powers, I feel like Chad and Orihime could have also gotten involved in order to activate their completed Fullbring. It would have been an excellent opportunity to enhance their Fullbring powers and to awaken newfound aspects of their Fullbring powers. If Chad was a member of Execution, it would have been great if Ichigo and Chad at least had a sparring session in order to help Ichigo control and master his new Fullbring powers. During those 17 months when Ichigo was powerless, it seems as though Chad and Orihime were not doing anything. During this time, they could have mastered their abilities, and the results of their training could have been put to the test by helping Ichigo during the Fullbring arc to awaken and master his own Fullbring powers. This also would have reassured Ichigo's worries from the Arrancar arc when there were concerns about Chad no longer being able to fight by his side. When Ichigo ends up being betrayed by Ginjo, Chad and Orihime are basically used as a plot device to deepen the psychological harm that he is feeling, as they are revealed to also be victims of Tsukishima's Fullbring, the Book of the End. In chapter 456, Chad and Orihime question Ichigo about why he is attacking their friend. They plead with Ichigo to remember all of the times that Tsukishima has been there for them. They have false memories of Tsukishima helping to save Rukia and even defeating Aizen. After Tsukishima continues to insert false memories into the minds of Orihime and Chad, they begin to suffer from some serious cognitive dissonance, and they have some sort of a psychological breakdown. Thankfully, Urahara and Isshin arrive and they knock both of them out before they start to truly lose their minds. This pretty much ends the role of Chad and Orihime within the Fullbring arc. Honestly, if things were to have been handled differently here, I think that this was a perfect opportunity to have Chad fight alongside Ichigo when he was battling Ginjo. It would have been a great chance to see Chad utilize his completed Fullbring form, which we see in chapter 242. In this form, Chad's entire right arm is covered in a liquid, which then becomes a form of armor, and his shoulder extension is also elongated. An alternative scenario would have included Chad fighting against a character like Mo Shishigawara. Mo first appeared in chapter 437, and it is revealed that he is a Fullbringer who had once worked under Tsukishima. The reason why I believe that Chad versus Mo would have been a good fight is due to the fact that Mo is a Fullbringer who relies on hand-to-hand combat, as we see in chapter 465. His Fullbring, known as Jackpot Knuckle, is manifested through the brass knuckle on his right hand, and it is capable of knocking down dozens of trees. This would have been an excellent opportunity for Chad to showcase his superhuman strength. Now, in the manga, Mo ends up being paired up in a fight against Ikkaku. It's obvious that reader sentiment maybe was waning, and Kubo had to introduce the Gote 13 during the Fullbring arc in order to maintain interest in the series. This had effectively cut short the time that we were able to spend with Orihime and Chad. Within the Can't Feel on World light novels, Hisagi wonders if Orihime and Chad's powers had come from the influence of them being near the Hokyoku. Urahara explains that the events leading up to them gaining their powers are significantly different from other Fullbringers. It is reiterated that the mechanism was different, but their origins and the results of their powers are still the same. This means likely that Orihime and Chad have probably randomly inherited a fragment of the Soul King's body by being around Ichigo. There are subtle differences between the way that Chad and Orihime's Fullbring powers had manifested. While it was Chad's pride in his own skin which had awakened his own abilities, on the other hand, it was Orihime's desire to protect Tatsuki in the early chapters of the series which had awakened her respective powers. I believe that Kubo could have focused on Orihime he missed Fullbring, and the fact that her hairpins became spirits who were able to talk to her a bit more during the Fullbring arc. This action of turning objects into spirits is not shown with any other Fullbringers, as most Fullbring powers are exhibited by transforming objects into weapons. As a human, Chad has an insane level of innate ability. This is displayed through his superhuman strength, his enhanced speed, and his high levels of spiritual pressure. In chapter 9, Chad is able to uproot a telephone pole in order to attack a hollow which he can't even see. In chapter 587, he is able to launch Ichigo into a building with his bare hands. Even in chapter 7, Chad is able to walk away relatively unscathed after catching a falling steel beam. I also feel like the Fullbring arc could have included more instances of Chad utilizing his defensive shield, which we see from chapters 259 to 260. I would have also loved to see more of his ability known as the left arm of the devil, but unfortunately this is criminally underutilized within the series. We only see this ability utilized during the Hueco Mundo arc, and it is virtually never really brought up again during the series, not even during the 1000-year Blood War arc. This is a shame because we don't really see him use his extremely powerful attack known as La Muerte, which essentially allows Chad to one-shot his opponent during the Hueco Mundo arc when he battles against Gantenbein. Now we do see Chad use La Muerte during the first core of the 1000-year Blood War arc when Ichigo and the gang are reintroduced within episode 1 of the new anime, where Chad punches a hollow into an apartment complex and we see the signature skull imprint of La Muerte on the apartment building. Now Ginjo states in chapter 452 that Fullbring is performed using the Fullbringer's own flesh and blood. Therefore, a high amount of strength and stamina is needed in order to maintain this power. Out of all of the cast of characters within Bleach, Chad was a perfect candidate to showcase the strength and stamina of his abilities, and it's truly a shame that Kubo didn't capitalize upon this more. During the Hueco Mundo arc, Chad is pretty much thrown into buildings, yet he is still able to carry on fighting. His remarkable endurance would have made him an excellent opponent to fight alongside Ichigo. There are a lot of rumors about the Bleach manga continuing via the Hell arc, so if Kubo does plan on releasing the Hell arc anytime soon, I feel like it would be an incredible way for him to showcase Chad's true potential. Many fans have pointed out that Chad's Fullbring literally translates to left arm of the devil. The resulting attack known as La Muerte results in a huge skull being formed into any object that Chad's opponent is thrown into. There is plenty of symbolism here associated with death in his attack, and I hope that Kubo expands upon the origins of Chad's abilities a bit more in the Hell arc. There's opportunity for Arancars like Noitora to return in the story, and since Noitora had one-shotted Chad in the Hueco Mundo arc, there is a possibility for a huge rematch battle to occur where Chad finally redeems himself and defeats Noitora in the Hell arc. Unfortunately, as much as I like Chad's character, he is somebody who got sidelined a lot during the 1000-year Blood War arc, and he just ended up getting paired up with Ganju in chapter 661 in order to fight against a group of statues. Despite having somewhat of a role in the story, the result of his battle against these statues was off-screened. We can't really blame Kubo for this because he was having a lot of health issues at the time of the finale of the 1000-year Blood War arc, and I do think that Chad's role will be expanded upon within core 3 and 4 of the anime, so I am really looking forward to that. So we now reach the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What do you think about all of the ideas that I've proposed for Chad's character and how he could have been utilized in the story a bit better? Did you learn anything new about Chad's powers from this video? And if there's anything that I've forgotten about Chad's powers or his friendship with Ichigo, then definitely let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. Lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach Explained video. A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.